If you saw someone turn water into wine or heal someone on their deathbed, would you believe they were holy? The life of Jesus Christ, Son of the Christian God, is recounted time and time again as it was filled with miracles. Establishing his credibility and powerful divine ability was often done through these miracles, as it was recounted time and time again by his disciples in their Gospels. Welcome to History Facts. Today we're going to be looking at the miracles of Jesus Christ as told by the New Testament and his disciples' stories. There are 37 known miracles, some more than others, but they all hold a piece to creating the image of the Christian figure as he's known today. As with all things written, it's hard to tell where the story begins and the truth ends. Still, we'll treat them all as a record of today's video and simplify it as much as possible. Healing the sick. This was among many of his miracles, showing great compassion for human suffering. Some miracles were done as signs of his divine authority, but the healing ones were often to meet a basic human need. Sometimes he would heal specific people at a request of a loved one, like when he healed the dying son of a Capernaum official. There was also when he cured Peter's mother when she was laid out with fever. Sometimes the Gospels show him as healing huge crowds who came to him seeking relief. Healing the sick came in many forms, and many of his miracles included this. The most notable include causing the paralyzed to walk, giving sight to the blind, curing those of leprosy, curing a woman from non-stop menstrual bleeding, curing people of deafness and muteness, healing the ear that had been cut by his disciples of a man who had come to arrest him, and many others. Though these miracles served to simply heal those directed at, they also served other purposes. His work with lepers and his willingness to help them show the depths of his compassion to help those who were rejected from society. Many others served similar purposes, if not to instill faith, gain trust, and assert his power and authority. Raising the dead. Though Jesus' healing miracles are great examples of his God-given power, no miracle serves his authority over life and death that raises the dead. Though he only does this a few times, the effect was strong to help foreshadow his own return following his crucifixion. The Gospel of Luke tells the account of Jesus raising the son of a widow from the dead. He also raises the daughter of Jairus, one of the temple officials, saying, "She isn't dead, only sleeping." This is primarily believed to show an understanding that death is a temporary condition, with resurrection as with his own. Feeding the multitudes, bread and wine. While numerous of Jesus' miracles are recorded in more than one gospel, only one appears in all four: the famous feeding of the 5,000. In the various accounts, Jesus has accumulated an enormous crowd who's seen the amazing miracles he's performed. Jesus tells his disciples to feed the gathered people, but the only food they have is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Jesus blesses the small offering, and it proves to be enough for all 5,000 with 12 baskets left over. The next day, this miracle is met with a request that it will, which earns a scornful response. This shows his belief that these miracles are meant not to fill their physical needs, but their spiritual needs. While most are familiar with this account, a second miracle was reportedly performed in front of a crowd of 4,000, with a slightly different amount of bread and fish, as Mark and Matthew's Gospels told. One of his best-known miracles, which is likely familiar to even non-Christians, was his very first, turning water into wine at the Cana wedding. During its great fame, this miracle was only recorded in John 2:1-11, when a wedding that Jesus and his disciples had been invited to ran out of wine. Jesus' mother Mary asked that Jesus help, and despite the fact he hadn't shown his divinity yet, he reluctantly agreed. 6 30-gallon water jars on hand for purification purposes were filled with a wine that was primarily considered better than what had been brought out before. Unlike other miracles, this one served a simple goal: placating his mother and saving his host from some embarrassment, though a second result showed his disciples a bit of his power over nature. Driving out evil spirits. Evil spirits and demons in Scripture were said to cause mental and physical illness, and driving them out would cause great relief to those suffering. Jesus' act of expelling demons showed his power and authority over the supernatural world. Jesus would encounter demon-possessed people like a man in Capernaum, and the demon was forced to confess Jesus' control over him. Another time, Jesus showed that he came for all of humanity, not just the Jewish people. For example, he once expelled a Gentile woman's daughter, showing his followers that even the smallest amount of faith will give them power. Control of the elements, nature, and creatures. This is a broader subject, as it was meant to show that Jesus showed power over things that didn't necessarily deal with human health. Like changing water into wine, many of Jesus' miracles illustrated his greater control over the natural world. Many of Jesus' followers were fishermen, so it should come as no surprise that many of these displays involved the waters of the Sea of Galilee. In Luke, an account shows Jesus recruiting his earliest disciples, Simon, Peter, James, and John, by telling them to throw their nets into the water after a long, fruitless day of fishing. They were skeptical but hauled in as many fish as their boats could carry. Another miraculous catch is detailed in John's Gospels, though at the very end, before his ascent into heaven to prove his identity to his followers. One that is not as well known is a miracle in which Jesus, when faced with a tax doubled by collectors, meant for Jewish men to pay to support the temple. He believes they should not need to pay this tax, but decides to not cause any trouble. Jesus sends his disciple Simon to the sea to catch a fish, claiming it will have a large coin to pay the tax in its mouth. This adept control of nature displays Jesus' instruction to not offend, despite admitting his belief they should not pay the tax, as not paying the tax would have caused issues. Another display came when he and his disciples were on a boat in the middle of a violent storm. His disciples were terrified that the shower would sink the ship, but Jesus slept peacefully beneath the decks. They wake him, fearful for their lives, but Jesus tells them to not worry and calms the storm. This miracle would have served a purpose and held profound meaning for Jewish disciples. Hebrew scriptures made it clear only one being has the power to control wind and waves, and this calming of the storm served as concrete confirmation of his divinity. Walking on water. The account of feeding 5,000 is followed directly by one of his other most famous miracles in at least 3 of the 4 Gospels, walking on water. It has since become nearly synonymous with the concept of supernatural good. In this account, disciples had boarded a boat following the miracles, but Jesus opted to stay on shore to pray. Soon they see a figure approaching their boat by walking on top of the waves. Jesus calls to them to not be afraid. Peter decides to walk on water to meet Jesus, which he manages at first on faith alone. Still, he begins to sink when he becomes afraid of the waves. Jesus saves him, rebuking him for his lack of confidence. One of Jesus' last miracles is also his strangest. A hungry Jesus approaches a fig tree looking for fruit but is met with bare branches and leaves. He then curses the tree to never bear fruit again, and when the disciples see the tree again, it has withered. The disciples ask Jesus how he managed to curse the tree. He explains the power of faith will enable them to do that and much more. This miracle is believed to have a greater symbolic meaning. The tree is said to represent the nation of Israel, and Jesus' curse, his frustration that the people failed to bear the fruit of righteousness. While Jesus' miracles continue in history as both facts to some or perhaps symbolism-heavy accounts meant to guide many others, Jesus is displayed in large part as an influential figure in strength and ability. The Gospels tell their versions of their stories. While there are gaps between them, the characterization of the historical figure Jesus Christ is primarily consistent. Whether you're a Christian looking to dive deeper into the gospel or a historian looking to understand and unearth the context of what may have happened, it's easy to see how stories of wonder like this may have enraptured the masses and inspired many more. This has been History Facts, and we'll see you next time.